Okay.
We can
So
do that later. No, that's fine.
I don't have a
Prof,
question. I don't have a question.
okay, sure. All right, can we continue?
Yeah, good afternoon,
yes, can you
sir.
just do a quick recap?
Okay. Quick recap. All right. So we're
Yes.
saying that you want to consider, so we talked about the three stages of you want to consider things to consider before, during, and after the publication cycle, and the things before. We talked about selecting a journal, and we talked about different types of journal based on scope, based on access, the discipline, and the ranking. We talked about where you can access information about different journals, and the example we gave was Schimago. You can go to Schimago's website, it's free, and you can search journals by the broad area, by the specific category. So, we organize information based on broad areas first, and then within those broad areas, you have specific categories. And then you can select which country the journal is housed in. And then you can pick the journal and look at its metrics. But either the annual metrics or the cross-year metrics, So Schimago uses what they call the SGR index and, 3-year impact. Well, that is not the same thing as Web of Science. Web of Science uses the impact factor and the 5-year impact factor. So different organizations use different metrics. That is not even important. What is important is knowing, where do you want to publish? What do you want to publish? Don't worry too much about the journal. The one thing you have to worry about, though, is making sure you don't submit your work to a predatory journal. And we talked about the identifying marks of a predatory journal. We said that the major issue here is that anybody that guarantees you that your paper will be accepted upon paying a fee is most likely a predatory journal, right? That doesn't happen in science. That any journal, in fact, any journal with a 100% acceptance rate is likely predatory in nature. So you want to be very careful where you submit your work. All right, and now we talked about some major criteria you want to be mindful about when selecting a journal. And we say that those fall into 3 buckets. Will they, that is the journal, will they accept my work? And this is what we'll talk about. You have to just use your common sense here. We all want to publish in the New England Journal of Medicine, but maybe that is not going to happen with this paper that is looking at knowledge, attitudes, and beliefs about mpox on my street. It's too parochial, it's too narrow in focus. And so you look at likelihood of acceptance, the article's format, and the content. And then you also have to worry about the second set of questions you want to ask is, do I accept their metrics? So those will be things like the impact factor, where the journal is indexed, and then the average time to publication. This is very, very important, average time to publication. Most times we end up worrying about the impact factor. We don't talk enough about the average time to publication, which is extremely important, especially when you are on a timeline. If you're doing a PhD, especially in parts of the world where you do PhD by research, and you need to have certain papers published before you can graduate, well, you need to worry about average time to publication. And there are two sets of timelines you want to worry about. From the time from submission to acceptance and time from acceptance to publication. Those are 2 different timelines. And they could be extremely variable. So the first timeline is, okay, from time you submit your paper to all the rounds of review it goes through, to when the editor-in-chief tells you your paper has been accepted for publication. Now, you might be happy and say, yay. Now, don't be so happy yet, because the second timeline is time from when your paper was accepted to when it's published. Now, ideally, that should take no more than a month. So for some journals, that could take over a year. So imagine you have to submit a paper before you, maybe to check off that you have finished something important, maybe a grant or your PhD. You obviously care about the time. So when you look at papers, when you pick a paper from a journal, look at, most journals will tell you first published on submitted on this date, and accepted on this date and published on this date. You want to look at those times on average, right? And that should inform you. For the very fast journals, between submission and publication, that should be around 4 months if a journal is pretty fast. but that timeline could easily span into years if you're not careful. So be very prudent and watch out for time, because time is very important. Then the third parameter is, can I pay for it? Again, this has to do with open access journals where you may have to pay a fee, right? And that fee could be something as little as $100, or could be something as high as $5,000 or $6,000. So you want to be careful, before you submit your work, and make sure that you can pay for it. Now, in many institutions, open access fees are covered by the institution. So if you submit a piece of work, it's just selecting your institution from a list, and that's all you have to do. But in some parts of the world, well, you have to pay for it out of pocket. And so if it's out of pocket, then you want to be very careful to make sure that it's something. I don't believe that anyone should pay money to publish work if it's not covered by the institution. Because I'm an editor-in-chief of a journal, scientific journal, but I feel this is one of the most broken areas of science, the area of scientific publishing, because all the three major ingredients that you need to publish are all free of charge. When you think of it, the idea behind the work, you talk about the actual paper itself, and then the peer reviewers. All of those inputs are provided completely free of charge to journals. And then, like, why do you have to pay so heavily to then publish your work? That never makes sense to me, but and so if your institution is paying for it, all well and good. But if you have to shell out thousands of dollars to cover, well, maybe you want to look for alternatives that could work for you. And there are some alternatives. So it's not as if you don't have alternatives. So let's look at some of the journals that are open access but are completely free to authors. The first is PCD, Preventing Chronic Disease. This is a journal that is owned by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. In fact, most of these journals are owned by major health agencies or governments. So all the first three, 1, 2, 3, are owned by the U.S. government, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So Preventing Chronic Disease, as the name implies, they publish mostly things around chronic disease and environmental health. So think of, any chronic condition or air pollution or things that directly impact chronic diseases are a good fit there. And, it's a great journal. So if you don't have money to pay for open access, but you want to publish an open access journal that is reputable, this is a good option. This is the infectious disease equivalent of PCD. So these are both owned by CDC. So while this focuses on chronic diseases, this one focuses on infectious diseases. Then you have the MMWR, which is one of the most impactful journals in the world. The MMWR is the official voice of the US government, US CDC, right? So you can publish in MMWR, but since it's the official voice of CDC, things published in MMWR undergo a very, very tight scrutiny before they're published. Expect to have entire sections of the document changed to align with CDC standards. So it's not, publishing here is not as straightforward as publishing here and here. And also the MMWR doesn't follow the typical structure of introduction, methods, results, and discussion. No, but they have their own special format. So, but it's a very, very influential publication outlet. Things that are published in MMWR have direct impact on policy, at least in the United States and even around the world. Then you have the Euro surveillance. This is published by the EU CDC, the European CDC. But again, it covers all areas from chronic and infectious disease, anything that has to do with surveillance. And then the next set of journals are owned by the WHO, the World Health Organization. And these are regional, some of them. You have, this one is focused in the Southeast Asian region. This one is focused in the Eastern Mediterranean region. And then, a region of the Americas, right? And then the WHO also has a global journal, the Bulletin of the WHO, which is as influential as the MMWR, right? And, of course, they accept publications from authors around the world. Now, this is a little known journal that is very impactful and also open access. It belongs to the family of British Medical Journal journals. It's the only journal in that family that is open access and completely free. And they publish things related to health, public health, family health, and things of that nature. So those journals, these are open to anyone, anywhere, and are 100% free. And then you have other journals that are conditionally free. So this means that they're not necessarily free to everybody. They are free to individuals who meet very specific criteria. So for example, the BMJ journals say they have 60+ journals in that family, and they offer 100% discount of the article processing fee, where all authors, again, emphasis on all authors, are based in low-income countries. Take note, not low and middle-income countries, low-income countries. So that's a very stringent criteria. And then you also have JAMA Network Open and JAMA Health Forum. Again, they also offer either a waiver or a full discounts for people who live in, again, low and middle income countries. My journal, the Journal of Tobacco-Induced Diseases, we also offer conditional waivers. One of the things that I think people don't realize is that even for journals that are published only on the web, there are also costs to running journals, and that's why journals maybe sometimes can't just give a full waiver to every single person who asks, because there's an entire team that does most of the work that is involved, and the open access fees try to cover some of those operational costs. But you should look around, right? Try and look around, and see whether there's a journal that, whether you're first of all eligible for some of the waivers provided by the journals, and definitely take advantage of them if you are eligible. Now, let's talk about navigating the peer review process. So now we have selected a journal. Let's talk about the process of peer review. So what do you need to do before submitting your work to a journal? Here are some of the things you need to have on hand for the initial submission. You should have the manuscript. That should be obvious, but I have to say this because what I want to emphasize is that the manuscript should be clean, should be double-spaced, and should be free of track changes or comments. I cannot count the number of times I have seen papers that are submitted to journals where there are still track changes and comments. Maybe the author did not see those comments because the changes were hidden, right? So it's very, very important that you make sure that your work is clean. And so let me show you what I'm talking about, and how to make sure that it's truly clean before you submit. Because sometimes it's very hard for you to know that the work has, let me pull up this. So sometimes you might not even know that there are still comments. So this document, for example, has comments here. But if the comments were hidden, so if you come to review and then you see comments, let's see, show comments if the comments are not shown. So make sure you always, before you submit your work, make sure you always come and try and show the comments, right? As a list, or you come and accept all comments, accept all changes before you submit your work, so that it's not a case of the comments are hidden and then the work is submitted, and when the reviewers or the editor-in-chief is going through it, they are seeing colors, they are seeing all manner of things. The problem with that paints you in a very poor light. So now I have not even read the work, but I already have an impression of you as somebody who is very sloppy and who doesn't give attention to details. Otherwise, why should I have a copy of your work that has track changes? And no. So please, the reason why I put this here is to make sure that, to remind you that before you submit your work, make sure you go to comments and accept all comments. Make sure you delete all comments, all track changes, everything is removed, that your manuscript is clean, and there are no elements of text or highlighting within it. So that's the very first requirement. The next is that you should have a cover letter. The cover letter should be personalized, and it should state that ICMJE criteria were met and that the paper is not under consideration elsewhere. And then you have to motivate why the paper is a good fit with the journal. We're going to do a hands-on demo to see how you can write this. Next, you have to provide a conflict of interest forms. For each author, you should have a conflict of interest form. Even if the journal does not specifically request for that, it's a good practice to do. Like, just as you're about to submit the paper, make sure you issue, as the lead author, this is your work. This is your job as a lead author. You share the conflict of interest forms to all the co-authors, and you chase them until you get it from all of them. Not everybody, of course, people forget. People are very busy with their lives. People will not remember to send back their forms. But yeah, it's your job to chase them and say, hey, please, I need these forms before we submit. So you compile all of them and you merge them together as one document, and you upload as a supplemental file when you're submitting your work. So, because every journal will have a space for supplementary material. Some journals will specifically ask for the ICMJE form, so you want to make sure that you have it. Another reason why you should have it on hand always is because your paper might be rejected from the first journal and you might want to submit to the next journal. That is not when you want to start looking for forms. You should have it on hand already. There's like all the BMJ journals, for example, will require that at the point of submission. So definitely try and get it from all co-authors. Then the checklist, STROBE checklist. It's just a checklist that indicates. Okay, let's look at STROBE. STROBE's checklist is just a checklist that is supposed to some journals will require you to upload the STROBE checklist, like the BMJ journals. When you're submitting that, they will require you don't have to make any edits to the form, to the checklist. You don't have to do anything, but they want you to submit the checklist just to show that you actually read it. So the checklist is just indicating different aspects of the scientific process that you ought to have addressed. And so submission of the form is an indirect way of, at least acknowledging that you at least know what this document is all about, and that you hopefully went through it. Why is this not opening? Let me try one more time. Alrighty. But this is the link. Let me drop this link for you guys. All right, so that's the STROBE checklist right there. And then authors and experts info. So again, make sure you collect information on all the co-authors. Don't assume people's names or don't assume their titles. Do not just hand out PhDs or doctoral degrees to people or masters of public health degrees. It's no shame in asking, hey, please, I need all of you to send me your names and your terminal degrees, your email addresses, and your current affiliation, right? Again, when you are the lead author, these are your roles. These are the things you should be doing as a first author. All the people who you worked on the paper with, send them an email just before the work is finished and say, hey, in preparation for submission of our paper to so-and-so journal, here are 2 things I need you to do. Number 1, I need you to complete the ICMJE form, which is this. Number 2, I need you to read this manuscript in detail and send me any comments you have. And number 3, I need you to send me your full names as you would like them to appear on the paper, first name, middle initial, last name, and your degrees, your email address, your official email, and your address, your institutional address. These are the things that you as a lead author should be doing. Don't just assume people's names, then you end up misspelling their names, or you write their names, switch their first and last names, which makes it very hard for them to now search for their papers in PubMed. Don't assume, just ask. And then you should also have on hand the names and emails for 2 to 3 reviewers who could be asked to review the paper by the journal. So let's look at these elements. So first of all, the manuscript. What should be on the manuscript? This is the title page of a manuscript. It should have the title. It should have the names of the individuals and their terminal degrees. So you don't have to list a whole range of degrees for any particular individual. Most journals will just request for the terminal degree, so the highest degree the individual has. So even if they have 10 degrees, we're just interested largely in the terminal degree. Of course, that varies from journal to journal. And then the affiliation of each individual. If an individual has multiple affiliations, then you can indicate them with superscript. So for example, I have my affiliations here as number 1 and number 2, which is the University of Pretoria and Harvard University, right? This other cohort also has 2 affiliations which are provided. So that's how you want to list them out. The corresponding address is indicated next, and then you have a short title. The short title is also called a running title. That's what might be displayed at the top page for every page in the work published. And then on the title page, we also have what we call declarations. There are several declarations. The first is the financial disclosure. The second is the conflict of interest. Third is abbreviations and then funding source. And then lastly is the contributor statement. All of these things should be on the title page. And then lastly, we have the metadata, which is the word count, the abstract count, the tables, the figures, and a number of supplemental material. So this is how your title page should look. And the role of this is when you submit your work, it allows for the editorial manager to quickly just on that page see to what extent your work complies with the requirements. Next, we have a cover letter. Now let's look at how you can create a cover letter. Does anyone have an abstract that they can share with us so that we can create a cover letter for a journal in real time so that it doesn't seem so abstract? If you have a topic you'd like to share, an abstract and a title, that's just all we need. The abstract, the title, and where you want to publish the work, the name of a journal. We'll show you how to create a cover letter for a journal, and then we can review it in real time. So if you have that, you can drop that in the chat box, and we can review that together. So again, we need 3 things: the journal, the name of a journal, the abstract, and then the title of a work. You can just copy and paste from a document you have currently existing. Okay, I'll wait a few seconds. If nobody volunteers, I'll just pick an arbitrary abstract from the internet, and it can be a new abstract, an old one, anything. It doesn't really matter. We just need an abstract, a title, and the target journal. All right, so while we wait for that, let me show you how you can get that set up. So as part of the AI toolkit we released, there is a functionality there that allows you to just write cover letters in literally seconds. So let's see how that works. We're going to use this case study to demonstrate how that works. So let's go to the Chisquares platform and log in. All right, so we're going to use the functionality there to show how we can create our cover letters within literally just seconds. So all right, so I have a title here. This is the title. Now we need an abstract from you. All right, so to access the AI toolkit, you come down here. This is still in beta mode, which means that it's still an experimental product, but you can still use it, obviously. So it comes to the AI toolkit, and here we're interested in the journal cover letter, the AI journal cover letter. So we're going to click on that. It asks for 3 things. It asks for the name of a journal, the manuscript title, and the abstract. So let's copy and paste those things, and then we can then review the performance. Let me download this document shared by this individual. All right, so this is the abstract that someone shared. Title: Navigating Barriers to Digital Engagement in Family Planning, Insights and Innovations for Nigeria. So this is the work here. Let's copy the title and paste it here. This is the title. Then the name of a journal. What's the what's the name of the journal? Is it all right, I will just pick this Scientific African as the journal name. So this is the name of the journal there, Scientific African. And then lastly, we have to provide the abstract. So we'll just copy the abstract here and we'll paste it in that field there. So now we've provided the 3 fields that we need. Now, all we now need to do is click on this button, create cover letter. So it takes the content and drafts the cover letter, which is working on now. And then when we're done, we can then edit it to our taste. But at least that gives us somewhere to start from. So that, for tasks like that are just very low-hanging things, we obviously don't want to waste time drafting cover letters by ourselves. But so this is the first thing that the journal editor or the editorial staff in the journal will have access to. And so you want to make sure that it captures the key elements of your paper in a way that is thorough and that represents the essence of the work that you have done. So let's give it a few seconds to draft the content for us. Oh, I saw a lot of you submitted abstracts. You can definitely try on if you are online now, you can log in now to the platform and try and enter the content of your abstract in there and try and see the output that has been generated. All right, so here let's review the content that has been generated for us. So first we have the date, which is today's date, I believe. Yes, today's date, 25th October 2024. The editor-in-chief, Scientific African. This was the journal we selected. Before you submit your work, you want to make sure that you put the name of the editor-in-chief. So if the name is Professor XYZ, you want to put the name there. Just make it personalized. So it says, we are pleased to submit our manuscript titled Navigating Barriers to Digital Engagement in Family Planning, Insights and Innovation from Nigeria, for your consideration as an original research article in Scientific Africa. All co-authors have made meaningful contributions to this work, accept full responsibility for its content, and have thoroughly reviewed and approved it for publication. We also confirm that this manuscript has not been submitted for publication elsewhere while under review. Now, this is very important. These are key elements that you want to submit, that have to be incorporated in that work. Then next paragraph discusses the relevance of a work. Our study investigates the barriers hindering digital engagement with family planning among women and girls in Nigeria, revealing the prevalent barriers of misconceptions, lack of confidence, and accessibility issues. These findings are critical because family planning is essential for women's health, autonomy, and economic well-being. Leveraging digital technologies becomes a promising high-impact practice in family planning, with the potential to improve family planning knowledge, perception, and behaviors among users. So that paragraph talks about how that work is important in the grand scheme of things. Right? Now, the next paragraph focuses on why the work is relevant to the journal. So you are trying to sell your work to me as the editor-in-chief. Like, why should I buy it? Why should I care about your paper? So this is the paragraph. This discusses that part now. We believe that this work will be of particular interest to Scientific African readers due to its focus on digital health interventions in Nigeria, a low and middle income country with a significant population using mobile internet. The study's relevance to the African region, coupled with its broader implications for global audiences, underscores its importance for advancing knowledge and practice in family planning and digital health. And then the last paragraph just thanks him, and we appreciate your considering our manuscript and are confident it will be a valuable addition to Scientific African, and so on and so forth. And then it signs out with your name. Of course, this is my account, so it's binding my name to the letter. So my name, my department, my organization, where I'm located, and my email. And so now you can download the cover letter and edit it, and then use it for your submission. So knowing fully well that it has addressed all the key areas that you need to cover in a cover letter. So this is essentially what the cover letter should look like, and that's the model that the AI assists you to create in seconds. And then the ICMJE form, like I said, the format of the form may differ from journal to journal, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is that everybody discloses any conflicts of interest that they have, and that's submitted. Then the STROBE checklist, this is what it looks like. You don't have to do anything on the STROBE checklist. So if a journal asks you to submit a STROBE checklist, you know that you don't have to do anything on the form. You just have to just download it from that site like we shared earlier, and just grab it and upload. That's all you have to do. There's nothing you have to fill on the form. Now let's talk about revising work. So is this on? Let me expand this view. All right. So now you've sent your work to a journal, and the journal has sent it back to you, and you have to revise the work. So what do you have to do at this point? Let's talk about that. Now, for us to understand how to revise our work, we need to understand the key actors involved in the peer review process. You have you, the author, there's the journal, which is the publication medium, and then the reviewers, which are the ones who judge the work and give the thumbs up or a thumbs down. Now, you also have to understand all the people who interact with your paper when you submit a piece of work to a journal. The first person is the editorial manager. So I'm the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Tobacco-Induced Diseases. When you submit your work, I'm not the first person who sees it. It first of all goes to a member of staff whose job is to make sure that you have complied with the instructions, right? That, we said the manuscript should be 3,500 words, that you have not exceeded that length. That if we said the manuscript should be blinded, you've removed all names, and so on and so forth. So it's the job of an editorial manager to ensure compliance. If any part of the instructions are not met, they're going to kick the paper back to you and say, please follow the instructions, right? And so that's the first person that comes in contact with your paper. Now, if the editorial manager sees that everything is kosher, they're going to forward that paper to an associate editor. In any journal, you have associate editors who are in charge of different areas. Let's say you're in BMC Public Health. That's a very broad journal that looks at everything from tobacco control to alcohol use and so on and so forth. And so an associate editor might be, routed to look at that work. And in some journals, it might go to the different journals have different policies. In other journals, it goes from the editorial manager to the editor-in-chief, who will review it and then assign the work to an associate editor. The associate editor is an expert in a given field. They know the field. And so the job of the associate editor is to review that work and to assign it to peer reviewers, to invite peer reviewers. Getting peer reviewers these days is so hard. You could invite, if you need just 2 peer reviewers, you could invite up to 100 people in some instances just to have 2 people accept. So please, this is a plea on behalf of all editors in this world to you. When journals request you to review work, just please kindly accept, because this is volunteer work, it's a labor of love, and so you should definitely accept a request for review, because finding reviewers is like pulling teeth. So the reviewers review the work, and then they send back the feedback to the journal. That feedback is received by the associate editor, who reviews them, adds their own comments, and then makes a recommendation to the editor-in-chief that this is the recommendation. The editor-in-chief is the final person who makes a decision whether to accept your paper or to reject the paper. And please know that this is not a democracy. It's not, it's not an issue of, I'm going to appeal. You can appeal, but that's not how it works. You're better off taking your paper to another journal. Because you should also recognize that the editor-in-chief is worried about many, many other things other than just the science. As an editor-in-chief, my job is to grow the journal. I want to make sure that the journal grows. And how do I make sure the journal grows? Well, I have to make sure that the journal appeals to a very broad range of people around the world, not just people from one part of the world. So I have to make sure that the papers being sent to the journal are truly international. So if I've had submissions about a topic from one part of the world, I might reject the next paper, not because it's bad science, but because we've had enough from that area. Like, let's look at other areas of the world too. And also, I'm more interested to look at topics that are contemporary, that are novel and even controversial, right? I obviously don't want to be publishing same old. So if you submit a piece of work, the analysis and the interpretation and everything may be completely accurate, but it doesn't help me grow the journal. I might reject the work, right? So you should know that the editor-in-chief has other things they're worried about than just the science is important, obviously, but then there are other things that we're worried about. For a very fast process, expect the peer review process to take 3 to 4 months. So please, if you submit your work to a journal, don't be emailing me as telling me, hey, I submitted my work 2 weeks ago. I'm like, 2 weeks? It has not even gone up for peer review. So please, just be mindful and understand that the editor-in-chief, the associate editor, the peer reviewers, they all have busy lives. This is a labor of love. So please build that into your realization before sending emails. Before you send an email to an editor-in-chief, allow at least 2 months, at least 2 months to pass before you say, hey, I'm trying to follow up on the progress of this, right? It's just basic courtesy, because everybody has busy lives and there's a huge volume of material to be reviewed. So that you should keep those realities in mind the next time you submit your work. So what are some of the outcomes from peer review? Well, you could have a reject. Reject simply means that work is not salvageable. And I put that in quotes because it means that as far as the journal is concerned, the work it cannot be redeemed. It doesn't mean that it's not good science. It just means that the journal there's no path to your paper being accepted in that journal. Option 2 is reject and resubmit. So reject and resubmit means that we reject this work, but you can go and work on all these comments and come back and resubmit. Now, why would they reject? Why don't they just ask you to revise? Well, it's because remember that we talked about indicators to look at journals for quality. And one of those is timelines. Time from submission of your work to acceptance, right? Or time to publication. Well, the thing is, if I as an editor provided comments and I see that these comments are very extensive, and I know it's going to take you several months to address those comments, all of those months are going to count against the journal, because when you now submit your work 5 months later, 6 months later, it would appear as though the journal took a whole year to process your work, whereas that delay was largely from your end, and that was not even your fault. It was because the comments were very extensive. So for all parties involved, so that we can also reset the timeline, it's better for me to just reject your work and say, you know what, take all the time you have in the world, respond to this comment. When you come back, you're going to resubmit your work as a new work. It's going to have a new manuscript number, right? And, and then we're going to take it from there. Then you can also have major revision. Major revision, in this case, the work is not rejected, but, the comments are substantive, but the editor-in-chief believes that it shouldn't take too long for you to address those comments and send them back. Then you have minor revision. Minor revision is just, editorial comments, light changes that should not take you, more than a week or 2. And then accept. It's very, very rare that you're going to submit a piece of work and it's just going to be accepted immediately. Almost, let me not say impossible, but it's extremely rare. And so, because there's always room for correction here. So those are some of the things that could happen to your manuscript when it's submitted. So why are papers rejected? Why is it that your paper might be rejected? Well, it boils down to 3 things. It boils down to the input, the outlet, or the output. So the input is whatever went into the work. So here we're looking at the data quality. Was the quality of the data good? Is data fit for use? Is it fit for purpose? Are you looking at very old data? Most journals don't want to publish data that is more than 5 years old. In fact, some journals will tell you categorically that if your data is more than 5 years old, please look elsewhere, right? All of those things are part of the input. Then study design. Is your work descriptive or is it analytical? Of course, if it's analytical, that means that it's more robust in terms of internal validity. The analysis, how well were they done? Have threats to internal and external validity been addressed in the analysis? And then the interpretation, is it data-driven? Have you considered confounders and all of those things? So the inputs are everything that went into your work. That is the most important aspect for why your paper might be rejected. And then we have the output. The output is where you chose to submit the work, right? So perceived fit with journals. The editor-in-chief, I'm like, is this work a good fit? If you submitted a paper that has to do with, let's say, calcium channel blockers among, pregnant women to the Journal of Tobacco-Induced Diseases, I'm likely it's going to get rejected because there's no relevance to the work. So the work we do. And so the issue of fit becomes important. Perceived impact of the paper. Is it a paper that is likely going to change policy or change the methodology or change how we do things? Of course, it's kind of things that journals want to publish. And then journal selectivity. The top journals have like acceptance rates of 5% or 10%, right? And then mainstream journals have like 20% or 30% acceptance rate. So you want to look at all of those things before submitting your work. What you really want to avoid is serial rejections, where you start very high and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to save the world. And you start with the Lancet. And then you after a series of rejection, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just going to kill this project. It's better for you to have set your ambitions very reasonable and submitted your work to just a middle to low tier journal and moved on. So you want to be very reasonable in your choice of journals. And then the output is how the research was reported, right? So we're looking at two things here, errors of omission and errors of commission. So errors of omission, you are missing chunks of key information, and errors of commission, you're just poor writing. Poor writing is a very dangerous thing. Like with poor writing, you can take the best idea and just kill it, like literally kill it. And good writing, on the other hand, can take a mediocre topic and make it sound excellent. So you need to learn how to write. You need to learn, and this is where you have to read novels, right? Novels expand your vocabulary, it builds imagination. So it's not just about, being a good scientist. You also have to learn the craft of language. How do you frame words and sentences? Those things are very important. And that's why it's good to read outside just technical information, read novels, right? And that will help you to see how authors who are very well versed in the art of writing frame things, and you can learn from them. Again, it's the same things we discussed in the previous slide, but just framed as a fishbone, where we're talking about the major reasons why papers are not accepted. This time we are breaking it down by the section of a manuscript. In the introduction, the gap is not well stated, or the research is confirmatory, right? This is what's going to kill you here, right? If the research is just confirmatory, it's just repeating what we already know. No editor-in-chief is going to reject your work because, oh, you did not state the gap well. No, they will just tell you to please reframe the gap so it's clear. But if your work is confirmatory, well, please consider somewhere else. Then in the method section, this is the most important part of a manuscript where your work is very likely going to be rejected because of the methods, because that's the entire backbone of the entire manuscript. So if you have poor quality data, poor analysis or interpretation of data, that's just sure reject. The results is not as important as the methods, because if the methods are strong, we can just work with you to reconstruct the results or restructure them. But sometimes you read the results that are so horrible that you're like, you know what, this just reject. Confusing language, incoherent language, the results are unbalanced. It's very obvious to you that this person has an agenda. Like, why are you cherry picking results? Like, you're not framed things in a balanced way at all. You are clearly on the tangent. It's clear you have an agenda. Just reading your results, it's obvious to me as day that you have an agenda. That's likely going to get rejected. And then a discussion, no clear implications, you've overinterpreted results. Again, these are things that we can work with you to fix, But if you have issues with the methods, you have major issues with the results, then those could be fatal issues. And then, of course, as we said earlier, the journal, when you ignore peer reviewers, or if your work is a poor fit, that also might lead to rejection. So how do you respond then to peer reviewers? Well, we can classify the comments from peer reviewers into 5 buckets. The first bucket is just minor edits. When this should not be controversial at all. They're just saying, oh, change this word, change current tobacco use to current cigarette smoking, change, provide footnotes, right? These are things that you can do within an hour. So this are minor changes. Anything that you can do within a couple of hours is a minor change. Anything that you can just do with Control H, find and replace, oh, that's minor. So minor changes are Control H changes. Just find and replace where the problems lie. Now, after minor edits, we have more substantive edits, but do not require more analysis, right? Here, the reviewers say, please provide a theoretical framework for this research, like underpin the study with a theoretical framework. Or the paragraphs are not clear, please rewrite the introduction section so that it's more streamlined. Or your introduction is too long, please make it more concise. Or the methodology is it's not clear why you used so and so methods. Please provide justification. Or the references, please update the references with newer references. So you see, all of these changes we've talked about, they are substantial because it's not just going to take you 1 hour. It might take you the whole day to fix those changes. And definitely, this is not just find and replace. This requires a lot more drafting of the work, but it does not involve analysis. So that's great because we don't have to redo the analysis all over again. And then you have, substantive changes that require analysis, and the analysis are feasible because you have the data and everything they're asking for is within the data. Please, you should realize that peer review is free review. When changes are asked and the changes are reasonable, they are there to help you. See, these strangers have just decided to provide feedback on your paper. Most likely, none of them has been paid, but they're providing feedback to improve your work. So whenever you can make those changes, it's for the good of your paper because our papers have mortality, right? They're going to live forever and ever, long after we're gone. So if there are changes that are being made or suggestions being made to improve the paper, please take advantage of that and improve the work. Also, this is another reason why you should never write code directly in the console, right? Let's say, this is what I mean. You're writing code in here. This is why this is a bad idea, right? This is why you should always write your code in a do file and save that do file so that when changes are required, you can go back to that do file. Not that you start wondering, what analysis did I even do here, right? So you should cultivate good habits as a researcher, and that includes documenting your code very well. Again, it's not an issue of when you come back, you don't understand the code at all because the code was poorly documented. Document your code very well so that when you come back, whether it's 2 months later or 6 months later, you know exactly what you're doing at that area of the code, and you can make the changes that are needed, right? So that's why it's great to have good documentation practices as a researcher because you might need to go back to that data and make changes. So, if you can't make those changes, please make them. And this could include your analysis, for example, did not account for age as a confounder. Please include it. Or it could be that you categorize age into, the categories are too broad. Let's say you have just 2 age categories, less than 50 or 50 and older. These are very broad categories that give room for residual confounding. So the suggestion was that please break down age into smaller categories so that there is finer control of confounding. That's a very reasonable feedback that you should be happy to take and implement it, right? Or the reviewer says, I think that we should be able to explore effect modification by gender because it's plausible to imagine that the effect of this exposure on this outcome is mediated by so and so. So please perform effect modification or stratified analysis within the groups of X, Y, and Z variables so that we can see whether this variable is an effect modifier. That's a very, very reasonable feedback, right? And the goal is to improve your work. So why will you kick against it? So if feedback is provided and you have the data and you can do it, please just do it. Don't just fight with the editor or fight with the peer reviewers for nothing. And then you have feedback that are in scope, they are reasonable, but the data are not available. So the reviewer says, can you please adjust for their disposable income or their income level? Like, well, actually my data set doesn't have income. So what do I do then? Well, can I look for a surrogate indicator, a proxy for that indicator? So let's say they're asking for income levels. Well, I don't have data on income per se, but I may have data on some other thing that is closely related to income. Maybe their shopping practices or their self-reported, quality of life or some other indicator that is highly correlated with income, right? I can use that. I can say, well, while we do not have data on the income as requested, we thank you very much for that feedback. We have used a surrogate marker or a proxy variable that is correlated with income as requested. And so we believe that at least that should reduce some of the confounding from that omitted variable. See, you don't have the information that they've asked for specifically, but you've gone above and beyond. It's clear to the editor that you are a reasonable person. You have made reasonable efforts to address the comments that have been raised during peer review. Now, you may not even have the data at all or nothing that is even correlated with that. But you can say, okay, we do not have this data and we recognize that that is indeed a threat to internal validity and that there could be some alternative explanations from this omitted variable. So we have included this variable, this as a limitation. And in future studies, we're going to address that. Again, that shows that you have at least thought that about the comments and sought ways to incorporate that in the limitation section. Now, the last set of comments are the troublesome reviewers. This is reviewer number 2. Comments that are wrong, that are out of scope, or that easily veer into personal attacks. Now, when we talk about scientific review, we use the term peer review, but sometimes that's a misnomer because these people may not be your peers. They could be people who are way younger in the field or junior in the field that have no idea about this topic and they're reviewing your work, right? It could be a recent PhD graduate. If there's one thing you know about recent PhD graduates, that they're always very opinionated. And they want to prove a point, right? And so some of the points may be well-intentioned, but just may be completely wrong or out of context, or may even be very insulting, like, oh, have you ever taken a class have you ever taken a class in statistics or research or epidemiology? Like, was this done by, any researcher at all? Like, those are, personal attacks, right? Ad hominem arguments. So what you want to do is obviously not return in kind. You just want to thank them kindly for their feedback and explain why no changes were done. Again, you don't have to blindly do everything the peer reviewers ask. If it's completely unreasonable, out of scope, just say, thank you for your feedback. We have thought carefully about your feedback, but have not incorporated it because of so and so. Please see the following citations for support of our position on this. And that's it. You don't have to respond in kind. You have to also know that you also need to know that the comments you are seeing are just the tip of the iceberg. Most journals allow the reviewers to share confidential comments to the editor. So when I'm reading the comments from your work, the reviewers may have said very nice things in the open letter, but they might say some other things that they just don't want to share with you in that private section. So keep that in mind. So when you're responding, you want to make sure that you really address the comments, and indirectly you'll be addressing some of the feedback that is private as well. So what are some of the do's and don'ts for this section when you are reviewing comments? Well, one, read, go, come back. That's the first thing you want to do. Just read it and then leave that paper for the next 1 week. But it's good to read it so that you are thinking about it in the back of your mind and you're formulating the response. Maybe at that moment you are so mad that your paper was rejected that you are not really objective. So when you've calmed down and you've let out the steam, you can come back and then respond. You must respond to every comment. You don't have to agree with everything, but you must respond. Stand your ground if you're right. Again, you're an expert too. So it's not as if you just have to agree with everything the reviewer said or the editor said. You can argue. I mean, we're all researchers. You can make your arguments in a sound, respectful manner, but make them if you have them. And then you don't have to die on that hill. You can admit when you're wrong, and move on. We're all humans. We all make mistakes. It's fine to make mistakes, but don't just stand fixated on a wrong opinion and just want to prove a point. Don't respond in kind. Like we said, even if reviewer number 2 is nasty, you don't have to respond in kind. You have to maintain the high ground. Don't just say done. Change so and so to so and so. Your response is done. No. Provide context, provide details, and tell me where it has been done in the text. Don't get mad, get better. So have a positive attitude. Remember that peer review is free review. And please don't be sneaky. If the peer reviewers made or editors made a statement or corrections, you made these changes, the paper was accepted, and then you maybe during another round of review you brought in back those same things that you were asked to correct. That is not good. Your work will be retracted for that because it shows that you have clearly no respect for the peer review process. So please don't introduce things into the paper after reviewers have signed off. There are many ways you can choose to respond to reviewers. There's 2 main ways that I recommend. One, you can use a table where you have the title of a paper here. So response to reviewer comments. This is the manuscript number. This is the title of a work. 3 columns. First column is the comments from the editor. The second column is your response to the comments. And then thirdly is where those changes have been made. So you can segment them clearly by who made the comment. So here we have editor's comments. Those are the editor's comments. Then we have reviewer number 1's comments, and you go on reviewer number 2, and so on and so forth. So this is a very logical way of presenting the information. The second option is to use a more narrative approach where you have, again, the same structure, manuscript ID and the title. Now, this time around, it's not in a tabular form, it's a narrative form. But you want to make sure that it's clear who the reviewer is and which comment number you're addressing. So here, reviewer number 1, comment number 1. Reviewer number 2, or reviewer number 1, comment number 2. If you're going to use this approach, make sure you highlight the comments clearly so that it's obvious to the reader where each comment ends and where the next one starts. Also, make sure you put your response in a different color entirely so that I don't have to be reading along, scrutinizing to see where the comment ended and where your own response started. And then lastly, proofing is the last stage of publication cycle. A journal proof is for proofreading. And so this is your last chance. Remember that think about the power of papers were published. These papers gain immortality, right? They live forever and ever. So you want to really take time to make sure that you proof your work very carefully so that you don't allow mistakes just creep into the process. And different journals have different ways of sharing a proof with you. It could be in a structure like this, it could via email, it could be a system, a digital system where you go in, log in, and make your comments. Or it could just be a Word document where they just share with you and say, hey, here are our comments here, please make your changes. It doesn't matter. Whatever format is, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you want to make sure you pay close attention to the changes, right? Some may share a PDF with you with changes highlighted everywhere. Like I said, what you want to make sure is that you pay close attention to the problem areas. Now, what are some of the problem areas that you want to be careful about? Author names and affiliations. Some people like their middle initials present. And for some people, that's just like their signature. When you hear names like Samuel L. Jackson, like it will sound weird if that L was missing, right? So if you have a very strong attachment to your middle initial, well, make sure it's there and it's not missing. Now, sometimes you have switched first and last names, which is very important because when you now search for yourself on PubMed, you won't find that paper because if you're searching, for example, by your first name or your last name, right? So make sure that it's not switched. Make sure that the affiliation is proper and it's your accurate affiliation. So this is very important. When you submit a work to a journal, most journals are going to take the affiliation, not from the paper you submitted, but from what they have in their system. So let's say that what is in the journal system is my affiliation several years ago with, let's say, the Harvard Tobacco Center, right? And now I'm at a different institution. But that's what the journal still has in their system. So regardless of the fact that the current paper still had my current affiliation on the paper, they are pulling my affiliation from their system. So I'll be shocked later on to see that, oh, where did this affiliation come from? Well, it comes from the system. So you want to make sure that regardless of what you wrote on the paper, make sure you pay close attention to make sure that your affiliation is correct because it's possible it could go wrong. Make sure you look for switch figures. The table might be referring to, or the text might be referring to figure 3, but figure 3 is actually figure 2. So make sure that it's fine. Make sure that the figures appear in high resolution. If they appear grainy, you might need to provide fresh pictures. At the minimum, make sure that your picture's resolution is at 300 dots per inch so that it has high resolution. References and citations should be clearly addressed. Citations are the numbers that appear within the body of the text. References are the things that appear at the end of the work. So if you have 13 citations, there has to be 13 references, right? You can have 13 citations in the text and 10 references, like something is missing. The reverse also applies. So you cannot have unused references, you cannot have unused citations. They should all balance each other. And then every time a journal gives you proofs, there are queries. It's very unlikely that there's going to be no query at all. Query simply means questions. Make sure you respond to each query that has been provided and that you make sure the tables are able to stand alone. If you have a table of, let's say, percentages, make sure that all percentages have the exact same number of decimal places. And please, I cannot emphasize this enough, you should also want to develop the quality of having quality assurance. That should be a culture, a personal culture. So go back and recalculate 10% of estimates. Like let me take one table and recalculate it, just make sure that everything is correct. It's very helpful to develop that culture of paranoia. I call it healthy paranoia, like the fear that you've made a mistake, which drives you to go back over and over and check your work to make sure that everything is fine. Proofs are generally allowed for within 24 to 48 hours, 24 to 48 hours. So that's when the journal expects you to submit the proof back. So what are some do's and don'ts for the proof? Please make sure you read the proof carefully at least twice. Return the proof in a timely manner. Please share the proofs with your co-authors. 2 pairs of eyes are better than just 1 pair of eyes. So please share the proofs with others and follow journal instructions on how to return a proof. If they said return it through the digital system, return it so. If they said send it back via email, send it so. Don't rush to the last minute. This is not a chance to rewrite the paper, please. Like, there's nothing more annoying that you send a proof to authors and then they come back with extensive changes. That is so unhelpful because that paper has been formatted at this point. And by bringing in extensive changes, you are breaking the formatting. It has to be reformatted again. So the proof is not an opportunity to rewrite your paper. It is an opportunity for you to check any last minute things. If you need extensive changes, or if you want to make extensive changes, as an editor, I may have to loop that paper back into peer review again because this is a new paper altogether. So please don't do that. And then you see also cases of people using the peer review period or the proof period to switch authors. Maybe they've had fights, authorship fights, and now like, oh, this is my opportunity to become first author. Please don't do that. Any changes in authorship have to be approved and agreed by all parties. And then don't hide major changes undetected. Sometimes you realize that, oh, I made a mistake during analysis. It's never too late. At this point, just email the editor-in-chief and say, while doing our proofs, we realized some major errors with our work. We kindly wish to extend or request for an extension of period to return the paper. And we understand that our paper will have to go through peer review again, but this is something important that we need to correct. We need to develop this culture as scientists of, one, acknowledging that mistakes are not the end of the world, and that we should correct mistakes, not try to hide them, right? So that's very important. There's no editor-in-chief in this world that will say, oh, no, I don't agree. Of course, that's a good thing. You're acknowledging that there's need for improvement. There's no editor-in-chief that will say, no, we shouldn't go down that route. Let's just publish what's wrong. You know, that would never happen. And then after peer review, if your work is rejected, you have three options here. You can stop the project or kill the paper. Maybe it's just not worth it. Maybe the data is just too old, or it's just at this point, you just want to move on. And that's fine too. You can pause to address comments. And this is particularly important if the changes are relatively minor. It's always good to take some days off to grieve and, you know, before you move on. And then sometimes it's just a case of the work is not a good fit and you want to submit to another journal. One of the good things about Elsevier is that they have this system, your paper your way. So if the paper is rejected anywhere, you can just submit it in the exact way it is. And then later on in the peer review, maybe during revisions, that is when you can then align your work with the journal's specifications. So these are your options. So again, as we said last time, manuscript writing is both a science and an art. So as an art, you got to practice. You got to write over and over and over, and that's how you perfect your crafts. All right, and so the mantra should be, and I moved on. So when you publish your paper, of course, you should rejoice and celebrate, but you should move on to the next paper immediately, because that's how you develop your crafts as a writer. All right, that's the end of our session. If you have any questions, we can take them now.
Thank you, Prof. Those who were posting their questions, can you please repost them? I see one. Can I publish as a single author? Pros and cons.
Yeah, you can publish as anything on a single author. There are no pros and cons. It's just your choice. Publishing as a single author means that it's going to be faster. You don't have to get approval from all people. But you should only publish as a single author if you know what you're doing. If you've never written, if it's your first paper, then let's just say it's a bad idea to publish as a single author, because you don't know what you don't know. And what you are robbing from yourself is opportunity to learn from others and to be mentored, right? So instead of you approaching someone and say, hey, this is my very first paper. I have done my best, but I understand that there are a lot of things I may not know. Do you want to take a look at it and see how I can improve? And you could also be a co-author with me. And then that's how you grow and get mentorship, right? So science is collaborative, but if you publish alone, there's no penalty, there's no crime, you know, it's up to you, really.
Okay, I am sharing the attendance link. Everyone, please check the chat box. I've just shared it. Please check, scroll up. All right. Does the waiver fees for low and middle income countries only cover for authors based on those countries, or will they consider if the topic based on these countries and the person is from these areas but based elsewhere?
No, it's not based. It's based on if you live in that country, if your affiliation is based in there. So, you know, remember that journals, in general, do not, if they had their way, will not issue a waiver, because it's a business model. You have to realize that it's a business. So the waiver is not just they're not just handing waivers to anybody who comes. You know, so once you understand it from that context, it might make better sense to you that it's a business for the publishing house to make revenue. So you can understand why they wouldn't just hand out, waivers. But you can check with the journal. And there are different journals. The BMJ journals, for example, some of them will allow, for example, if the work is done as a student, like let's say your thesis or your dissertation, they might allow you to publish it, but only if your study is registered, if I remember correctly. So again, this is one of the advantages of registering your study so that you can meet some of its requirements. Different journals have different policies. So I want to make it very clear that there's no universal rule that blankets every journal. It's completely up to the individual journal to set whatever standards they want or to waive those standards as the case might be.
Thank you, Prof. Does the completely free to author open access journal mean the process fee is also waived and the author pays no fee at all?
Yes. So those journals I mentioned at the beginning, yes, those ones, there's no cost whatsoever. You publish, there's no cost involved. So that's the advantage of those few journals I mentioned at the beginning. This one's right here. So you don't pay anything for processing or anything.
Thank you. What is the difference between article published in a journal and those published in supplements?
They're all journals. So as a supplement, an editor-in-chief, and supplements come from two directions. As editor-in-chief, I might decide that this topic is a hot issue, it's a new issue. I'll call out for a supplement. I'll call out for a special edition of the journal that will focus purely on that topic. So we're going to put an announcement on our website and authors can respond. Typically, there's a deadline for you to submit work to that supplement, and we'll provide the button so that when you're submitting, we'll give you clear instructions. Let us know that you're submitting to this supplement. So it could be a drop-down menu that says select where you're submitting to, and you can select that supplement. So that's one area. Or sometimes an organization might meet the journal. So for example, at CDC, we used to do a lot of supplements. So we will meet the journal, or let's say the FDA will meet the journal. So we've had supplements published, for example, in my journal of Tobacco-Induced Diseases, by FDA. The US Food and Drug Administration will say, hey, we're interested in publishing a supplement on, let's say, menthol cigarettes, right? And so we want to negotiate with you to publish it in your journal, in which case, as the editor-in-chief, I will say, well, this is how much it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you so amount for us to have that supplement. And so once they pay, we'll process everything, and then the supplement is done. So it's the same journal. There's no, in principle, there's no difference in terms of work published in a supplement. That's just regular submissions. It's still the same paper, still going to be indexed wherever it's indexed. It's just the process and the intention behind the supplement that is different. Supplements are meant to address very specific issues and very specific periods of time, so that if you're submitting to that supplement, it must, address the issue that is on hand.
Here's that question again. How can I identify predatory journals?
Please, it's not worthwhile looking for a list. There are many. If you Google, there are many people maintain many lists. But it's not really helpful just looking for a list. These lists are very long. Are you going to spend? You're not likely going to spend your whole day reading through a long list. You should just understand the broader identifying marks. That's more helpful, right? Than having a long list of items to read through. And those identifying marks are what we discussed earlier in the lecture.
Right. Ishmael, please unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof, for the good presentation. I joined the class a bit late, so I'm sorry if my question has already been answered in the course of the class. I have two questions, basically. The first is, how long should one wait before writing inquiry to an editor on the status of his paper. I'm asking this because I have once sent a paper that spent almost 2 years. I sent the paper since January 8, 2022. And I was tracking the status of the paper from editor to reviewers assigned to all of that. It's reached about 2 years before they got back to me. Simply because I was being able to track it, I felt there was no need for me to inquire. But I don't know if there is a time frame that one should need to inquire on the status of the paper. Then secondly, sir, if one has published a paper as preprint with 3 authors, and then when a journal reviewed the paper, get it back to the author, and in the course of doing the review, another person contributed, and they felt there is a need to add another author, but they still want to remove one of the authors that was already in the preprint. Is that still possible, or there is a problem with that? These are my 2 questions, sir.
Okay, so your first question about how long. So on behalf of all the editors in the world, I apologize to you for having that too long. 2 years. That's a long. That's a very long time. And so you shouldn't have to wait for 2 years. I would say that if your paper has not been, if you've not gotten any feedback in 4 months, right? You can write to the journal and say, "Dear editor-in-chief, I submitted my paper 4 months ago, and since then I've not heard anything. I am assuming that you are having difficulty finding reviewers. Please find below a list of possible reviewers, independent reviewers, who might be a good fit for the work." Because that's the only reason why the paper will stay that long. The editor-in-chief is having problems finding reviewers. Like, you don't understand how hard it is for editors to find 2 people who will agree to review a paper. It's so hard. And these days, people are so busy that finding 2 reviewers, like I said earlier, is like pulling teeth. So one way you can assist is when you follow up with the journal, don't just follow up and say, "Hey, where's my paper?" Well, try and be a solution. Try and make yourself useful, right? And say, "Okay," and please don't bring your friends and suggest them. Look for people who are credible, and who the editor-in-chief is likely going to say, "Okay, yeah, these are reasonable names, and I'm going to contact them." And so that is what you could do to hasten up the process. It's not from anything malicious. It's just because, again, the editor-in-chief has just tried but can't find 2 people to review your work. And so that's one way you could address that. The second question about...
They have actually said exactly that when they got back to me. They said they have got 1 reviewer who has reviewed the paper, but they have sent 17 other invitations and they couldn't find suitable reviewers because of the topic. So eventually they suggested to transfer the paper to another journal, which they did. But thank God it has been accepted just a few days ago now.
Yeah, it's not unusual to send up to 100 requests just to get 2 people to agree to review, right? And you also have to realize that the editor-in-chief, that's not his full-time job. He's busy elsewhere. See, I'm teaching a class now, and I have to go. Obviously, I don't have time for that, right? So it's you have to understand that all of this is happening in the context of a real world where people have other obligations, and your paper is important to you, but it may not be the most important thing to this editor. So any way you can do to be helpful. So my point is that when you're sending feedback or following up, don't just follow up. Make yourself useful. Say, "I acknowledge that there may be challenges with finding reviewers, and here are my recommendations." Provide names of people who could be reviewers and their email addresses, and justify why they are a good fit, and that's going to be helpful. Your second question about removing somebody who was from a preprint. Well, if the person was there because they did the work, it's not ethical to remove them just because you guys are now fighting, right? Again, if somebody did the work, they should get credit for the work. It's simple. That's the basic ethical principle here. If I did the work, I should get credit. If I did not do the work, I should not get credit. So if I did the work enough to the point where I was listed as an author on the preprint, and now you want to publish it in a journal, and you want to remove me, See, there's a problem that with ICMJE. ICMJE, by the way, is International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. It's all the editor-in-chiefs coming together and laying out policies for how science should be done and peer review should work. So according to ICMJE standards, that is not a right thing to do, because in this case, somebody has done the work, but you want to strip them of the reward. So no, it's not a good thing to do. Next question, please.
Charles?
Okay, thank you, Prof. As always, I really appreciate it. I have a paper, especially that paper I shared that we use for this example. I submitted it at Open Public Health Journal, and the editor-in-chief had, they had reviewed and accepted it as we submit the full paper. But there are some caveats. The caveat is that to ensure that, I was trying to pull out that email. I've been looking for that email, but I think I still remember that either the collaborators or something I must ensure that either my organization is not tending to publish it or something. There's one caveat like that. So because of that caveat, I had to reach out to my former organization, because I've left where we did the work like 2 months ago, but I submitted this in like some 3 months ago. So I've reached out to them to say, this is what I submitted this paper for a conference. It was accepted. I now I wanted to publish the work. So, but this is the caveat. So, but up till now, they've not given me like, okay, go ahead or don't go ahead. So now, like you mentioned, it does occur to me that I need to get back to the editor-in-chief to say that I don't know how to put it. So I want to can you help me give me a line of thought on how, because keeping the editor-in-chief in blank for me is not a good practice, So, but I don't know how to put it scientifically or make it very professional. So maybe you can help me out, Prof.
Well, it's just a matter of permissions here, really. So you could approach your and there are 2 ways you can go about it, right? One is to ask for permission, or one is to notify them. Notifying them simply means you go and say, hey, dear Professor so-and-so, this notify you that the work which I did here while employed in so-and-so capacity is being prepared to be submitted to so-and-so journal for publication, right? And we've gone through due process, and all contributors have been duly listed as contributors to the work. Thank you for your time. So in this case, you're just notifying them that, yes, this work has been processed for submission, so that they don't go and submit elsewhere at the same time, so that you don't have duplicate publications. The second approach is to go and ask for permission, like, hey, I was here as a so-and-so. I did so-and-so work while under this environment, and now we wish to publish the work in a journal. All people who contributed have been recognized as authors, and the purpose of my message is to request permission and institutional support to go ahead with the submission. However you choose to do it is up to you, but there has to be clear communication to make sure that there's no risk of duplicate publication from you submitting and them submitting, because that's what leads, and that could lead to retraction, and that benefits nobody.
Okay.
So you have to figure out how you're going to handle that. Okay.
I think this is super helpful. Thanks. At least let me take the second option. that fits more for me. It works more for me. Thank you, Prof.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prof. Are there questions that I missed? Publishers like Elsevier issue certificates of recognition. and waiver for or discount for subsequent papers published. Isn't it time to begin to incentivize reviewers and make the process more attractive, especially with the heavy APC paid?
Yes, I agree with you. And there's actually a case that is currently in the US courts where some individuals have taken the biggest publishers to court, some of the top 5 publishers, for very serious charges. In their lawsuit, they identified 3 major issues. One, that they have claimed monopoly over they've hijacked their intellectual property by demanding that while their work is under submission at their journal, they cannot submit it anywhere else. Number 2, by stripping them of their financial, resources. Because while the intellectual property is free, the journals still impose hefty fines for just publishing the work. And several other charges that were laid out in the lawsuit. That lawsuit is going to have significant implications for how research is published. So we're just, right now we're all spectators to see how that's going to turn out. But definitely your sentiments are felt elsewhere in the world, and people are beginning to realize that, well, this doesn't seem very fair. How come the paper is free, the peer review is free, but you guys are making a ton of money? And so that we'll see how that plays out in the courts.
One reviewer gives an excellent feedback and was communicated by the journal. Then shortly after, while working on the comments, the second review comes, damning and in sharp contrast to the first. How do you reconcile the 2 positions?
Well, peer review is subjective. There are different people, different contexts, different understanding. So there's no rational basis to expect that the peer review would be identical or will re-echo, right? And again, we call it peer review, but sometimes the people reviewing the work are not peers. There may be people, you might be, let's say, a mid-career professional, and your work was sent to 2 people at extremes of the professional spectrum. One who is just a recent graduate from the School of Public Health, who is as green as it gets. The other is like an emeritus professor of epidemiology. Of course, the feedback is not going to be identical, right? Even though they're all called your peers, none of them is your peer, really. So there's a lot of subjectivity in the peer review, and that's why it's not a democracy. The editor-in-chief's role is not to say, oh, 3 reviewers out of 4 said reject, so we'll reject. No. All of the feedback by the peer reviewers is just a recommendation to the editor-in-chief. So when I'm making a decision, I'm not counting number of people who said reject versus those who said accept. No. I'm just looking at your feedback and say, okay, I've heard all you have to say. Now let me make my own independent decision. So the editor-in-chief's decision is made independently, but with advisement. It takes feedback and from the other people and makes a decision. So one person's bad feedback is not the reason why your work was rejected. Your work was rejected because the editor-in-chief felt that the work could not be accepted at that time.
Thanks, Prof. How long can my preprint paper stay before submitting to a journal?
There's no time limit. Your preprints are accepted. They are not, there's no shame, stigma, or anything with publishing a preprint. And so all preprints are issued a DOI. DOI is a digital object identifier, same as a journal, and they will eventually live side by side for the rest of their lives. So there's no limit.
Thank you. What is your take on the use of AI in the peer review process?
It should be done in a way that reflects. So first of all, we should understand the risks associated with AI. So the risks are that it could give information that is not necessarily true. So it's okay for an individual to use it if you're an expert and you understand that whatever suggestion or feedback have been provided may or may not be true, but you have the expertise to recognize that. There's a problem when you don't even have the expertise to recognize what is true from AI or what is not true, and you're just taking it line, hook, and sinker. Then that's a real problem for science, because that's no longer peer review. This is completely, you're causing more harm than good. We also have to consider the issue of privacy also, right? Privacy, because you're taking content from an author, which is privileged information. When we give you work to review, that is privilege. You're not supposed to let anyone, you're not supposed to share that with anybody. But here you are taking this work and sharing it with OpenAI or with Google, right? That is a breach of the contract between us as the reviewers, as the journal editor, and you, right? It is a serious breach of contract. So in general, you should stay away from that. It's a different thing if you did your peer review and then you use the comments, your own comments now, and ask ChatGPT to refine the comments and correct typos. That's a different thing entirely. But asking an AI system, so there are two issues involved here. One is the issue of privacy. So it's not that there's anything inherently bad with AI, but it's that you are breaking contractual agreements, right? Most journals have those standards that say, and let's take, for example, JAMA. I believe JAMA has a checklist. JAMA checklists AI. That's the peer review. So the issue here is not, so this is for, okay. So this is JAMA. JAMA, by the way, is Journal of American Medical Association. So JAMA and the JAMA network journals have extended the policy on use of AI tools to peer reviewers to ensure accountability. And so the idea is that manuscripts and other things like I said earlier, protected confidential information. So you have to check a box when you peer review for JAMA. They have the checkbox that you have to check that you have not done any of these things. Entering any part of a manuscript or abstract into a chat box, right? Because this violates, it's not that the chat box is bad, it is a direct violation of contracts between you as the journal says, please don't do this. Not because anything is wrong with it, but because it is now a contract which you have violated. So for that reason, no, you should not. Again, like I said, you can do your peer review independently. It's a different thing taking the content of your peer review and saying, hey, correct grammar. But taking the individual's own paper and dumping it into ChatGPT and say, correct, find issues, that's now a stretch, because you have potentially violated the confidentiality agreement and potentially exposed the individual's privileged work to others. Now, if it's your own paper, sure, you can go ahead, you can put your own paper into ChatGPT and ask it, but again, you have to know that it may not come out correct. So that is how, that would be my feedback to you on that.
Thanks, Prof. Okay. How do I handle authorship for research born from personal ideas? How do I need to include others here?
Personal ideas, don't all research come from personal ideas? Well, you put your ideas on a concept proposal and share it with others and say, hey, here's my concept notes. What do you think? Do you want to collaborate with me on the topic? That's how you can do it.
How do I handle authorship for research? Oh, sorry. Can I submit the same paper article to more than one preprint servers simultaneously?
In general, you want to submit one thing at a time, because you don't want to be, especially for preprints, the bar for publication in preprints is much lower than for journals. So what if both of them accept? You're just creating duplicate publications in the field. So just submit one at a time.
Thank you. Good evening, Prof. Thanks for this beautiful lecture series. My article was published a few months ago, and another journal sent an email message to me. Oh, to write commentary on that article for publication in their journal. How could I go about this, sir?
Yeah, you can write if you want to write. You can write. If you don't want to write, don't write. A commentary is just a very high level, newsworthy take on that paper. And so it's okay to write a commentary on that in another paper. That is not considered duplication of the work at all. So it's now left to you whether you have time for it and you have interest. That's up to you at this point. But that does not violate any ethical standards.
Is single authorship completely wrong?
That question has been answered.
Why is Free APC Journal taking long time to process manuscripts than others?
I have no idea. You have to go to the editor-in-chief.
What are the consequences of duplicate publication?
Retractions. Your work will be retracted. Retracted means that we are removing it from the field, from the, body of published knowledge. So you're going to have a retracted article, and your article going to retraction watch. It's a bad thing. Let's just put it that way.
Okay. Okay. I think these are all the questions. Why? Yeah. No. Are there any other questions? Charles, your hand is still up. I don't know if you have another question or you forgot to lower it. Okay, great. Okay, it's up again. You can ask.
Okay, Prof. Sorry, I just wanted to ask because I'm anticipating what will happen when I make this request. Again, I know they want me to add some people are in the units, both at the global level and the in-country level. So that is proper, right? Is allowed.
Well, I don't know the context. If they did the work, of course. If they did not do the work, then it's not ethical.
No, some of them were at like the way the project was done. We have the global team, which we also contributed in the discussions generally at that high level. But I was the program manager here in Nigeria. The program was implemented in 3 countries. So I was the one managing the Nigerian country program. So, but we had the global director who, like, more or less, she sits at that level, interfacing with Bill and Melinda Gates. So we have series of persons, even from the Ministry of Health, that also contributed, to the process in terms of discussions, the approvals, and all that.
Well, discussion at high levels does not qualify someone to be a co-author. The ICMJE has quite strict standards for authorship, which you might want to consider. And so the ICMJE standards are clear for individuals to be an author. Let me drop this link for you.
I read it recently.
All right, great. So you already know the standards. There are 4 standards, but individuals have to. So again, the political navigations, that's gonna be up to you. But the standards.
So I think that is the angle. That's the angle. But okay, that's fine. No problems.
Okay.
We'll cross that bridge.
Alrighty. Any other questions?
But just to say that if every other conditions is met, like is allowed to include those that feel that contributed to the process, like add those names. There are things that they are not doable, but there are things based on they are doable. You can adjust.
So the principle is clear. Those who contributed to the work and met criteria for authorship should receive credit. Those who did not should be acknowledged. Getting credit can be through listing as authors if they meet ICMJE criteria for authorship. If they did not meet that criteria, then they have to be acknowledged. So that's the standards.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Hi, good afternoon, Prof.
Hello.
I wanted to find out, this is Lynette Obare. I wanted to find out if there are journals that give an indicative timeline on the time from the time of submission to the time, like you mentioned 2 timelines. So
Yeah.
are there some that will give you an indication or give you a sense from the submission to acceptance and also from acceptance to publishing? Thank you.
Well, journals will tell you this, but please, it's just averages, right? Where, so for example, let me show, Journal of Tobacco Control, for example, you might get a sense of, they might give you, if you read the why publish with us. Of course, every journal wants to publish with them. So they will tell you, so if you go to authors, for example, they'll tell you time to first decision with review, 64 days. And, different journals will frame that information in different ways. Please don't take this too seriously, right? This information is based on the past, which has no bearing with your current paper. Your paper might end up being 64 months. I'm just exaggerating. But it's hard to tell from just historical data how that predicts the future, or more importantly, your own case. But this is still a good point, data point to keep in mind to say, okay, more or less they say it's going to take 2 months. This is never going to happen, by the way. But, you can use that as a rough estimate to see how far that goes. And maybe you can use this as ammunition, right? You can say, well, you said, and this, take note that also, they said median. This is a very clever choice of words. The median is less susceptible to outlying values. There's a reason why they did not use mean here. The mean will take it quite a long way away. So they use median to tell you that. So you want to read between the lines. It's never, I've published extensively in TID and tobacco control. There was never any paper that was published in 64 days. I can assure you right from the start. So my point is that you can use this as ammunition when you're responding to the editor-in-chief 2 months later or 3 months later, that, oh, well, it's my understanding that, the median time to first decision is 64 days. I still on your website. So I'm wondering how far we are. And if you're having problem with finding reviewers, well, here are some suggestions. So that might help, but, it also might not make any difference. So you want to take that with a pinch of salt. And it's for that reason that some journals now have even stopped publishing the date submitted. They will only publish. So, for example, one journal that has made that change, let's see, I think Pediatric. Now we just published the date the journal was. Let me see if I can pull a paper here, for example. I believe they now just published the date the paper was accepted. So that it's now very hard for you to now even know how long it took. So that's a trend that most journals are now following, where they may just tell you, let me see this, for example. So see, for example, accepted for publication, July 17th, but it's like, okay, when was it submitted? You don't know that. So without 2 dates, it's impossible for you to know how long that paper spent in peer review, right? So this is now a very common practice by most journals, where they will just tell you the date it was accepted, but you never have that information on the date it was submitted. So you cannot calculate the median. So so you may just have to submit, in the blind and just hope for the best.
Thanks, Prof. Prof, please, in case a journal is decaying my paper, can I write to them to stop the review so I can send to a different journal?
That's a nuclear option you don't want to do unless you have no choice, because it is, like, imagine the amount of work that has gone into your paper at this point. At this point, you're better off just waiting, because number one, when you halt the review process that way, that's almost like you should consider yourself blacklisted from that journal. Number two, reviewers are such a tight community. How do you know that the reviewer who is currently reviewing your work is not the same person that will be sent that same paper, right? And so I would strongly discourage you from exercising that nuclear option. Now, I'm not saying that you can never use it. I'm saying that you want to proceed with caution. It's a different thing if your paper is stuck 2 years in the journal. Well, then you can do anything you want, but that first option might be challenging. And another thing you also want to consider is that it depends on the stage that paper is, because there are legal issues to consider as well. If the paper is stuck, remember we'll talk about two periods in time. The first cycle is from submission to acceptance, then from acceptance to publication. If you're in the second cycle of a period where you have already signed the authorship forms transferring copyrights to the journal, then you don't own that paper anymore. That paper is no longer yours. You have voluntarily handed over the copyrights of that paper to the journal. So you have no business talking about, oh, I want to withdraw this paper from your journal and send to. The journal is going to tell you, and who told you you have, the publisher is going to ask you, who told you have the right to do that? You don't. The copyrights to this paper belongs to the publisher at this point. So it depends on where it is. You may not even have that option if that paper is in the second phase already, where you have already transferred copyrights from yourself to the publisher.
Thank you, Prof. Can we get the list of 3 journals in the WhatsApp group? They're on the slides. Okay. Is there any free AOC journal you can recommend, Prof?
That was the whole talk was structured on that. So please review the slides.
The Zoom, your hand is up.
Why didn't you pronounce the full French?
Please pronounce it, Prof.
That's your task.
Okay. All right. I don't know if I missed any questions. If I did, this is your last chance to post them again, please. Eric, you can unmute.
Hello, Prof. Thanks so much for the great session. Yeah, my question is which journals are more receptive for somebody who is in the social sciences and wants to move into the health area? So I'm in marketing, and I'm looking at how I can blend, those 2 domains, and just wondering what areas and what journal will be susceptible to that. Thank you.
So there are 2 ways you can find out. Number one, you can go and search here, right, and figure it out. Option number 2, that exact search you typed, the exact thing you read, you can open ChatGPT or Bard and type that in, and whatever answer it gives you, just validate that those journals actually exist. Not everything it might tell you might make sense, but of course, there's a good percentage and a good number of what it has suggested to you might make sense. So that way, the answer is really customized to your field. But,
okay.
So you have 2 options. Go to Schimago or you go to ChatGPT. Tell it the exact same thing you asked, and you can now validate the responses with the journals from Schimago.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, I assume we've answered all the questions.
Yes.
All right, super. Well, thank you everyone for coming. And if you have any other questions, you can email them. Otherwise, we're going to see you next week for the last talk of the series. Have a great day.
Charles.
Really?
Charles won't let you.
Really? Look at it. It's not about Charles, it's you.
Hello, Prof. No, it's not a question. It's just to say that I was able to unravel that the sample size stuff. You know,
Okay.
he gave me assignment yesterday.
Okay, good for you.
So though it's not on this section, that was supposed to be yesterday, but I'm excited that I was able to resolve that issue.
All right, good for you. Thanks.
Yeah. So the platform is on point. In fact, the platform just added only one participant to it. So using the normal formula, then accounting for the response rate, then the design effects. So once we add up those, everything is on point and good to go.
Yeah. So
I didn't add the other FPC, right?
FPC is conditional on.
Yes, I didn't add that. I just straightforward, and it gave me 960, but the platform said 961. So I assume maybe those fractions, like you can't tell those fractions as one. Like this is human being now, so we don't have fractions. So that's my assumption of that one.
Yeah. So in general, the feature, if you have a discrepancy, the default thought process is that I am wrong, not that the platform is wrong. Before we put out any work, of course it goes through extreme validation.
Sure.
It cannot be a petty error like sample size calculation. It's literally impossible.
Yeah.
So
yes, I know. The point was that when you're presenting to people, they want you to prove. Most people come from the angle that they just want to make everything wrong. They want to be the right, they want to be on the right side. Then whatever you're presenting is wrong. So they want you to prove that, So I wanted to understand, when I'm presenting it to them, this is how the system arrived at this answer. That was what I wanted. Not that the system was wrong. But like I said before now, I told them that there are some consideration that the system did in the background to come up to this number, but that I will interface with you. Then when I come back in the next class, I'll be able to take them through on how the system arrived at the number.
All right, super.
So,
all right, thanks so much.
Yeah. Evening, Prof. Thank you so much for.
Okay.
Let's see what you've cost now. I'm supposed to be feeling.
It's Charles. It's not me.
Okay, I think we have one last comment.
Prof,
yes.
It's I don't know if I can.
Please go ahead.
Okay, it's about Starter, the software. I don't know if you can help me. I'm working on the last script that we work when we were doing Starter, the session about Starter. But now I have lost my software. I don't know if you can help me. I have a Mac computer. My computer is a Mac, so I found many difficulties to install it.
You will have to write to Stata Corporation and request it. We're not collaborators with Stata. So you have to write that company and ask them for that.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. All right, bye.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, as usual, Neliswa, Abayomi, everyone else who's helping us. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much for helping. Thanks, Ilya. Thanks, everyone. And don't forget, please head over to the Chisquares platform, create your proposals, let us know your thoughts. That's bad.
Thank you, Lunguli. I am not in a car today. I'm in my room.
Oh, wow. Okay, well done. I hope you're doing well.
Yes.
You sound happier.
Oh, yes, very
in
well.
The car. All right. Thank you.
All right.
To sign that.
We hope you're all following us on LinkedIn. Those who are still here. We didn't share the links today. Let me quickly share while people are still here. Follow us on LinkedIn. We'll post our slides. Awesome. Thanks, Zichat. Zichat. Zichat, can you please unmute yourself? Oh, I should stop the recording. Sorry.